Welcome to the settlement. I'm Finn, and in this video we're going to be doing an overview and then a review of the latest piece of content to arrive on the Kingdom Death Simulator, Echoes of Death Series 2, or Echoes of Death 2. I've put together a written review of this a number of years ago when it first came out. Everything I say here, pretty much, with the exception of anything that's specifically digital, applies to the physical copy. This series are a bunch of generic heroes, which is a separate line of Kingdom Death adjacent miniatures sold on the Kingdom Death shop, retranslated into echoes of those characters. So we have here in this selection the Bard, the Cleric, the Gladiator, and the Ranger. This is, as I say, the second of the series. I have a video review and written review of the first one in the series, so you can watch that or you can read that. If you want to read them, click on the description. There's a link to the Patreon. If you go to the reviews collection, you'll find them there. You don't have to be a patron to access the reviews. I just give my patrons early release of reviews, except for things like this, which is just going straight out once it's all finished and edited. The concept of Echoes of Death are not just bringing these characters across in a form, but also providing this concept of strains. The strains are unlocked via persistent milestones that run from one campaign to the next. This is something Kingdom Death's had since the beginning. If you go to the Game Over page in the rulebook and have a look, you'll see the milestones right there. Admittedly, you may not have actually noticed them, the way that it changes your settlement over the years as they pass, or I should say the campaigns as they pass. But it's always had a sort of legacy light version where there's some persistent growth from one campaign to the next. This kind of formalizes things a little bit more. It's not like Gloomhaven, but it's sort of kind of like Gloomhaven. Ish. But as I say, this has been in the game since the beginning. It's just an expansion of it. Now, there are a couple of issues with the Echoes of Death series that have started to really take a hold as the game has expanded. We'll go through those during the review section, but for now I'm going to shut up and we're going to open this box. Okay, so here we are. This is everything set up. I have all the components of the game, plus I have the Game Over page here because it's both relevant to what I was just talking about, and also it's relevant to one of these particular strain unlocks. As for the rest of this, I'm going to go through the models, I'm going to go through the strains. That'll be the first half, and I give you my thoughts and opinions, and then I'll dive into each of the fighting arts a little bit separately. So if you just want to know what the unlocks are and you don't want to have the fighting arts spoiled, which is tricky, you know, you tend to see them, but it is possible to grab them out of the box, keep them face down the whole time, and unveil them as you unlock them, which is fun. So I'm trying to help protect that here. So spoiler free, first part, except for what the milestone unlocks are, and then in the second part, the back end of it, that's when I'll go through the fighting arts. But we will start first of all with the models. So these are some of my favourite models in the game. We have here the Bard holding a whisker harp with a dagger of some kind behind, or a short sword, so pretty generic. She's sort of sitting on this base covered with various tendrils and markings of various types. It's kind of nice to have this model of a character sitting. Not super common, especially as it's a bit more of a temporary respite kind of pose rather than properly sitting in a chair and then moving around. But this is a great little mood piece. About the only thing that's never really come clear is what this hat is. It is a reference to the original Bard hat, but with a King of Death spin on it. It just doesn't have any particular specific gear reference, whereas the rest of this is all White Lion. Then we've got the Cleric. So the Cleric is, I really love this Cleric's design. This is one of my favourite lantern styles. This is an alternative Riot Mace design, unless sometime later in the future we have an entirely different style to it. And I love this little clasping sort of finger way of having a holster, suggesting that you sort of snap into place to hold the mace, and you can like pull to release it. She's also got a shield that it could be a leather shield, it could be a knuckle shield, considering she's wearing the rest of it all as Gorm. It's still a great model, looks very sort of uncertain and vulnerable, but also powerful, with again another really nicely sculpted base, this time reflecting the Gorm itself. Then we've got, I'll be honest, this is one of my favourite models ever. This is the Gladiator. She is wearing White Lion on the bottom there. This is leather, right? And then or lantern. She's got lantern cuirass here. She's got Phoenix helmet, and she's holding the lantern glaive from the Kingsman, and she's got a stylized leather shield. This is definitely a leather shield. Really, really love this model. Absolutely fantastic. A delight. And then last of all, we've got the Ranger, which is usually the model I'll use for any of my archers. She's wearing rawhide with a little bit of White Lion stuff. She's got a catgut bow, so just a very useful model, as all of these are. You know, White Lion armor, Gormant armor, pretty much Phoenix armor. Yeah, sure, it's mixed, but you can just kind of play with it as full Phoenix, and then rawhide with a bow. These are all very useful, they're great on the table. However, there is an unfortunate step backwards. So if we bring over here the Gladiator and we'll assign here. The original Echoes of Death were listed as being digitally distinct. And what that means is, if we've got our fighter here as an example, she has a preferred weapon type. As we can see, we go in, this is a mighty bone axe. So she's got big bone axe. Because axes are a preferred weapon type, when we put other axes on there, it plays a nice little tune and changes the axe that she's holding, which is really, really sweet. You can see again, lantern blade, boom, that's changed. I think this is the great stuff that you can have with digitally distinct stuff. You can do this in physical. You'd have to cut the hand here and set up magnets. It's a lot of work, and sometimes if you don't have strong enough magnets, you end up with droopy weapons which just point downwards constantly. So it's not something I like to do. I did a bit of testing of magnetics on the Survivor armor kits, and decided I was just happy with close enough representations, nice looking models, rather than having weapon swaps. But it's really nice that you can, in digital here, have a version of this fighter holding a lantern glaive. It just looks great, it's fantastic. And another bonus, in physical, these ribbons have a tendency to break a lot. I'm getting close to just removing them entirely, because you can barely see a headband anyway. But here in digital, you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's fantastic, but the trouble is that this, I've tried and tried and tried. This doesn't seem to work with any of these guys. And the only thing I can get any sort of relationship at all, indicator, is in the Gladiator. It plays the sound. But nothing changes on the model. So at this point, I don't know if that's accidental leftover coding from the fighter that's been put into the Gladiator, or if it was intended for them to swap weapons and the functionality just isn't there yet. I don't know. So it's not advertised on the store page. The previous one, Echoes of Death 1, has an animation showing the fighter swapping axes, a little gif, which is great, but these are all listed as being digitally distinct. They don't have that functionality right now. I can see it might be tricky with this model in particular, given how she holds the glaive, but she's a she's really a shield user. It should be the shield that's swapping out for her. Bow over here, club here, and I would really love to see her holding some of the other instruments in the game. The drums would be very cool. Even if it's just drums and whisker harp, that would be a nice start. But I'd love to see the gorn and the frog dog whistle, etc. So that's just, it's not in here right now, and I don't know if it's coming in the future or not. So that's a bit of a shame. There's not really anything digitally unique about these in comparison to the previous set, which genuinely did do something that the physical ones don't. So, otherwise, lovely models, useful, decent loadouts, perfectly fine to play with. Very happy to see them in the game. We'll be using them when playing digitally, as and when I get that fitted in, which I usually do when I'm juggling different campaign games. I moved my Kingdom's Death stuff to electronic, so I can physically play things that come in electronic. Anyway, let's get on to the actual strain system itself. So just to repeat the concept, essentially you have these milestone cards. They'll tell you what the condition is, and when you complete it, then when you hit this step here, the milestone step, you will perform the unlock, which has this permanent effect below. It will unlock the given fighting art and sometimes gives something else to the survivor who achieved the unlock. So we'll start with over here, which is the Mimetic Symphony. This is during the settlement of a weird dream. A storyteller tells a well-told account that includes a dreaming survivor hearing the Devil's Symphony. Essentially, this one's kind of a, have you drawn weird dream, and do you have someone who's reasonably good at telling stories? Boom. It technically doesn't work if you play solo, but I mean, if you draw weird dream, just basically unlock this. And the permanent effect is, and I do like this text a lot, still possessed by restless sleep, snatches of the malefic tune spread, humming in every mouth. Under the stone-faced ground, a massive lodestone vibrates sympathetically, perpetually attracting a rhythmic spree of frozen lightning. Its thunder echoes in all directions, the beat throbbing in every ear. You permanently add the Infernal Rhythm Fighting Art to your Fighting Art deck, and the survivor gains the Infernal Rhythm Fighting Art. Now, that brings me to something else worth noting about Strain Fighting Arts. You're only allowed a maximum of 5 in your deck when you start a campaign. So that wasn't a deal with Echoes of Death 1 because you just had 4 total, but now we're going to potentially 8 available. So you're only ever going to see at most 5 of these per deck. How they're selected, I believe it's listed as, you randomly determine which 5 to be added and the rest just get stored for later. You could, of course, choose which ones you're putting in, which could matter because if you have something that relates to, I don't know, bows, and you don't have a single monster that supplies any bows in the campaign, really you just got to stare long and hard about this survivor and ask them why on earth they are developing the ability to fire bows better when your settlement's never even seen a bow and got no idea what it is. So sort it out, Ranger, sort it out. So yeah, that's one of the issues that already exists in this. We'll talk about a couple of others near the back end, but I don't think you should follow randomly. You really should. You don't want to have a Strain Fighting Art which you spent all this time unlocking and then you go into a campaign and you're like, well, I don't have any instruments in this campaign, or I don't have any shields, or I don't have any bows. It's not fun to have content you cannot engage with. Second one, oh yeah, sorry, so this is really easy to unlock anyway. The Mimetic Symphony, really easy to unlock, it's just a matter of time of getting the weird dream. Then we have Surgical Sight. This is when a survivor in a settlement with ocular parasites gains the Extra Sense Fighting Art. That's why I have this here, because ocular parasites is right here. You need to hit 3 milestones on regards to lost settlements. And if we just pop off from the page and come down here, you can see that's the point where ocular parasites becomes relevant. Now, technically, you could just throw away a load of settlements to get to this point, but to be honest, if you've been playing the game for any length of time, you should just naturally reach these and unlock them. This is what I was talking about with the game has always had these milestones in it. It's always had this semi-legacy campaign progression between one campaign and another. It's not really, strictly speaking, a proper legacy game, because you're meant to destroy components and alter the game in a fashion that you can't roll back without a refresh pack, such as the Aeon's End campaigns, or of course Gloomhaven, Frosthaven. This is a bit softer than that, so there we are. You can see you get to here, and if you have this, which is +1 permanent accuracy to all survivors, and the starting White Lion is more dangerous and a bit slower, that's the unlock they're talking about. And then as soon as you get extra sense on any survivor, once you're past that milestone, then undetectable creatures in the fluid, filter of the eyes, transform perception, skin cannot hide the pulleys and springs of muscle, their workings are as plain as a stone-faced ground, the birth of ocular symbiosis is turbulent, the survivor suffers the blind, severe head injury, and you permanently add the convalescer fighting art to your fighting art deck, and the survivor who's become blinded will gain the convalescer fighting art. So this is what I was talking about, with a little bit of sometimes that affects the survivor with either a positive or a negative. So that's this unlock. It just takes time again and a little bit of randomness. Then we've got Hyper Cerebellum. This requires 2 survivors with the prey disorder to have a newborn. So you need prey to turn up on 2 survivors, and that's pretty random. All you can really do is try and force extra disorders onto survivors, which has its own problems. And then the child is born with an enlarged brain capacity for awareness, hyper alert and raised, fearful of the unknown. The child takes up the shield to protect themselves. The aptitude for observation gives them skills with a shield no master could ever dream of. You permanently get the shield orang fighting art to your fighting art deck, and the newborn survivor gains shield orang fighting art, 3 levels of the shield weapon proficiency, and the weak spot disorder at their body hit location. Really, really good unlock. A weak spot body is not a big deal at all. You know, you just got to wear something on the body slot. You're pretty much going to be doing that anyway. So the hardest part of this is having 2 survivors with the prey disorder. That just takes time, and remembering that these unlocks happen. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. Finally, we've got Marrow Transformation. This is when the hand removes a broken leg, severe injuries from a survivor with the bow weapon specialization. This is really hard to put together, because you need to have that showdown against the hand, which means the hand needs to be your node 3 monster, and you need a survivor with bow weapon specialization to suffer a broken leg, which is kind of, you know, perfect situations align, and it's easy to forget about this. The best way you can engineer it is when you have a broken leg survivor, you push on them to level up bow, because expecting it to happen the other way around is quite difficult. The permanent effect is knit together according to unfamiliar anatomic principles. The mended bones grow new configurations of connective tissue, developing an unnaturally smooth gait. The survivors' pounding steps do not impede their aim. They permanently gain the rolling gait fighting art, and it is added into the deck permanently. So this one's definitely the hardest to unlock. The rest of these, it just requires a fair amount of playing to get these unlocks done. One of the things I will note is this can be harder to remember if you're playing in a smaller group. If you're playing with more people, I'd thoroughly recommend you pick somebody to be like the keeper of the milestones, so they can internalize them, keep them around near them, and help steer everyone towards unlocking certain milestones, because these strength fighting arts are fun. That moment of unlocking them is sweet, and the actual fighting arts, all of them here, I think are at least excellent. One of them's maybe a little bit too good, but we'll get into that in a moment. One of the real awkward parts about this, though, is strain and fighting arts. They have very little impact if you're playing with ARC survivors, which is the big, expanded, upgraded survivors that come in the Gambler's Chest. And in that, basically, they almost never get fighting arts. There's a safety valve to allow survivors to get secret fighting arts at a small cost, but it's very, very difficult for them to just get normal fighting arts, and strain fighting arts are not excluded from that in the system. So if you're playing already with ARC survivors, which we don't have on the simulator yet, but if you are, it's hard to justify these for just the game content. It is difficult to do that because, well, you're buying stuff you may not interact with. If you really like models, and I think these are some of the best like narrative sculpted models out there within the whole range. All of these I had a thoroughly wonderful time painting and actually want to paint again. So that's a really good indicator of how much I like them. Yeah, if it's just game content you're after, you need to think about how often you're going to interact with the strain system, and if you are already playing with Ark Survivors and you really enjoy that system, this isn't for you. Especially in physical, because it's quite expensive compared. It's like $10 plus tax on the simulator, which is a lot easy to justify, and the simulator doesn't have the gambler's chest yet. So that's my recommendation. These used to be an easy auto recommend. I do think the actual content, while small, is high quality, and for people who paint and play and get pleasure from the hobby aspects as well as the gameplay aspects and the world building aspects, will get a lot from this. But yeah, if you're into Ark Survivors, you can maybe skip on these if the models don't do it for you. You know, that is a shame, but that's the way it is, unless Campaigns of Death changes something and maybe we get a safety valve for Strain Fighting Arts the way that we do with Secret Fighting Arts. Of course, there are house rules. You can play differently with Fighting Arts if you want to, especially Strain Fighting Arts. You could treat them as Secret Fighting Arts as purpose of the mechanics if you really wanted to interact with them. I think that's fair enough. They are rare, they are unusual, they are more powerful, they do feel like Secret Fighting Arts in the Fighting Art deck. So, we'll see what Team Death wants to do. And that's it. That's it for the spoiler-free portion. I'm going to now go into each of the 4 fighting arts with a little bit more detail, talk about how strong they are, how much I like them, what they're involved in. So if you don't want that part spoiled, I don't have any additional thoughts in respect to how good this is. As I said, all of these fighting arts I think are good. One of them is maybe a little bit too good, but only if players take advantage of it. So that's that. For everyone else, let's get into the spoiler portion, and we'll go through these one at a time, starting with Infernal Rhythm. So, Infernal Rhythm, you may spend your activation to play an instrument in your gear grid, reveal the next 3 monster hit locations, put them back in any order. So that first part there turns any instrument in your gear grid into a cat-eye circlet, basically. That's very, very strong. And it's better than a cat-eye circlet because it's actually 2 things at once, as long as we, ignore the issue that Noisy Gear has with, the Harvester, and the way that Kingdom Death tells you you shouldn't play with instruments by its mechanics, which is a shame. But, some people play differently, some people don't, for some reason their campaigns don't have the Harvester in them. Lucky them. And even if you do, you can take these to Nemesis showdowns with absolutely no concern at all. So I don't like that I have to keep talking about this each time, but you cannot talk about instruments without considering the fact that they have a 1% chance of deleting the survivor who's carrying them, or one of the survivors who's carrying an instrument per hunt phase, and that is not fun for the person controlling that survivor, and that is not fun for everyone else who arrives at a showdown and they're downed by a whole survivor. Instead of being 4v1 around where the game's balanced, they're now 3v1. Yeah, anyway. The second half of this is a little bit stronger again. It's whenever you activate an instrument, gain a lantern token. At the start of another survivor's act, you may spend 5 lantern tokens to stir their blood. They gain a full, basically a whole act. They gain a knight and a lightning bolt, a move and an activation. This is really good. So this whole package, Infernal Rhythm, is really, really good. If you have access to the Grim Muffler from the Holiday Lucy, then even better. You can run this in hunts and everything absolutely fine. This is one of my favourite fighting arts of all, one of my favourites, because essentially it's giving you a 10th piece of gear in your gear grid at the cost of a fighting art, because suddenly you've taken your drums or your harp or your whistle or whatever, and you have compressed a cat eye circlet on top of that as long as this survivor is around, and that's really, really fun. But also every 5 activations you get a bonus refund to add to somebody else. Music is lore-wise a part of Kingdom Death I really love. I really, really love the whole music aspect, how it interlinks with the Devil's Melody and the Infernal Rhythm, and all of this is very cool. And I will play with instruments whenever I have the opportunity to do so, and this is a big sign that you should be playing with instruments. Okay. Next up we've got Convalescer. So sympathy and tenderness elevate your care. Whenever you remove bleeding tokens, gain a survival or add armor points, increase this benefit by 1. And then in contrast to your care, your attacks become more crude and they gain the club keyword. So increasing the benefits of removing bleeding tokens, gaining survival, adding armor points, that's really good. That's just become better as time has passed. It is worth noting that the departing step is like adding armor points, and we've never had a officially released FAQ like update or clarification as to how this works, because technically each departing instance of a like armor or a shield, that's a separate instance and it gains this benefit increased. I don't think that's the intended point of it. These days that's not how I play it. Instead I just I'll add 1 flat set. I do feel like maybe this should have said when you remove bleeding, whenever during the showdown you do this, would have capped it quite nicely, would have made sure it doesn't have this sort of vague word. So if you don't apply it to departing survivors, to the departing convalescer, it's still really good. It's a great support thing, and also having the club keyword on any kind of weapon is actually really cool. Anytime you can have multiple weapon types on a single weapon, there's space for some very fun stuff. So if you choose to look at this and go, alright, I'm going to apply it only to the showdown, or I'm only going to apply it once when I depart and then during the showdown, it's a very reasonable. If you look at it and try and follow it exactly as the rules go in the book, it gets a bit crazy. I don't recommend doing that. It's the game, the game can't really fight back if you're going to play through the systems like that. It can't even get upset with you and flip the table because it's on the table, so it can't flip it because it's, you can't flip something you're standing on, especially if you're an inanimate object like a box and some cardboard and dice. So treat with caution. This is very, very strong, even if you don't try and rules lawyer it really hard. Then we've got Shieldarang. I'm often torn between these two. Like I think I said Infernal Rhythm's my favourite. Shieldarang is also my favourite. So this is, you're impervious behind your shield. If you have a shield in your gear grid, ignore the first severe injury you suffer each showdown. Always nice to have something like that. You don't want it, but it's pretty good to get that kind of protection for unfortunate situations. And if you have shield specialization, shields in your gear grid gain reach 3 and +1 strength for each level of shield weapon proficiency you have beyond 3. So yeah, first of all, Shieldarang is literally how it sounds. You're throwing the shield like a boomerang weapon and it's bouncing and coming back. Anna Poots, I believe, pitched the name. Anna seems to be behind some of the most fun portmanteaus in the game, and this one I really, really love. And yeah, you just get to play as Captain America. Shields are great fun. Being able to get extra strength to level your shield more easily and also to have range on it is incredibly fun. I do notice, like now I'm looking at it, it doesn't mention shields in your gear grid. Really should, again, maybe like the throne keyword as well, but it doesn't really matter too much because they're technically not range, they're reach 3, so that's probably the reason it doesn't have throne listed on it, even if it feels thematically a bit wonky. But this is really fun, this is really, really enjoyable, This is one of those ones that with certain other options to pass on fighting arts to later survivors, sculpture, the promotional partnership and things like that, I'll often want to be passing this on because it just makes me happy. It really does. You know, every settlement deserves a Captain America, and here it is, the Gladiator. Finally, we have got Rolling Gate, which I always want to say Roiling Gate, but it's Rolling Gate. Spend an activation to notch an arrow. Your next attack with a bow ignores cumbersome. At the end of your attack with a bow or arrow, if you hit the monster from outside it's facing, it gains a flinch token. We'll get into the flinch token in a moment. The first thing to note is basically we have the ability to notch an arrow and then move around, and then next turn we can move and shoot again. So it's slightly stronger than surging in combination with your movement to fire a bow, or like dashing in combination so you can move and fire. So I should say, it does strengthen what you're doing. But the big thing is this flinch token. So when a monster gains a flinch token and attempts to perform a reaction, you will cancel the reaction and discard this token. So that is really useful. To cancelling reactions is amazing. It's cutting off what the hit location deck's trying to do. That is very, very strong, and it doesn't fall off if you hit locations that don't have reactions. So that's really, really good. This is a excellent utility support tool that helps a bow survivor just improve everyone's attacks a little bit. It is powerful. It is just hard work to get this from the hand. It is hard work to do that. It took me a long time. This was the last one I unlocked by a long distance. Although if I'd been going from the start, this probably would have taken longer because of how long it takes to get to ocular parasites. So yeah, all of these are great. They get better the more options of that type you have. So shields are quite good because eventually you can just be throwing a beacon shield, which is an excellent weapon anyway. Well, pretty solid as shields go, and getting more strength on it can just push it to be used as a weapon for a long time. Infernal Rhythm, obviously we always have access to at least one instrument, and then it gets better the more options you have, but in truth you generally don't need much more than one really good instrument because they're an item, they scale throughout the whole campaign, so you don't need to keep swapping out your instrument for a new one unless you want a different ability from it. So just solidly good in every campaign. If nothing else, you can just have a set of drums and that's good enough. This one, again, it's interacting with bleeding and ways of gaining survival. It gets better if you have solid access to acanthus plants. That can be used quite well, but there's also a few more and more abilities that are turning up that allow you to add armor points to other survivors. One of the big ones that's come up is this is better with Frog Dog armor than anything else, because Frog Dog armor has an ability to activate and gain 1 armor point. This is giving you 2. That is incredible if you hit this early. It was so impressive. Obviously 1 point of armor gained one at a time becomes weaker the further into the campaign you go, because how monsters scale and their damage and everything, but still this also is giving survival and giving bleed benefits, so it's really good. We talked about how these two are great. The more shields you have in a campaign, the better, because you can start improving on your shields as early as possible to get shield specialization as quickly as possible. So the Gorm and the Frog Dog both have early shields. And then, well, anything that has a bow. Catgut bows from the White Lion, we've got the Arc Bow from the Phoenix, we've got a generic bow now with the new Perfect Survivors, with the Blacksmith extension. It's not on the simulator yet, but I expect it will arrive because it's wonderful. And yeah, the Sunstalker has a bunch of really good bows as well, including my favourite bow, the Sunshark bow. So yeah, that's me finished. I'm done. Echoes of Death has that problem now with, like, what are fighting arts doing if you're really into Ark Survivors? if you don't play with them or you've tried them and you don't like them, then this is an easy pickup because it's adding so much to every single different campaign, giving you some excellent specific strategies you can follow, especially if you've got a lot of ways of handing on weapon proficiency and fighting arts to later generations. Really, really, really fun. This, I think, like Echoes of Death gets better the further into the series you go, but this is quite a big peak in improvement from Echoes of Death 1, which honestly had a couple of fighting arts that I really don't care much about at all, and one I love, Backstabber. I love knives, dagger, stab, yep. Really like what that does. But these are all great, and there's no, like, if I was going to say, if you came to me and you said, I can only afford one, which should I get? Out of these two, Echoes of Death 1 and Echoes of Death 2, I would recommend Echoes of Death 2. And that's it. That is everything. I hope we will see some digitally distinct changes, but before we go, I'm just going to share what I think is well-performed digitally distinct things, and I haven't had a chance to talk about this elsewhere. So the Gorm has these two extra functions added to it. So we've got this Power Vomit, which is, there we are, it's just vomiting up a few bits and pieces. That's essentially just a fun little visual thing, but it is tied into Retch. So now if we click the Retch button, you see the Gorm bounces back, highlights the area which has been hit with Retch, and then performs the little Power Vomit animation again. This is the kind of stuff I love to see for digital. That's a great little bit of, like, just, we don't have to ever think about who's been hit, and the animation afterwards is kind of fun. It's hard to, for me at least, bye dice. It's hard for me at least to find it gross. Takes a moment for it to appear because this skull is so comically big that it kind of amuses me. But this is really sweet. More of this kind of stuff, and I really hope that they all get their favoured weapons and weapon swaps added in a bit later down the line. So that's it. Okay, if you like this stuff, then you can support me on Patreon. Likes are always appreciated, and just watching. Thank you for watching, getting to the end, and thank you to my patrons, especially my pillar patrons, who make it possible for me to budget to pick these things up. That's it, and until next time, happy hunting.